Homeless black girl dances with millionaire's wheelchair-disabled son. Then a miracle happens. At 16, Amira Collins had already learned what it meant to be forgotten. Every morning, before the sun cut through the skyline, she packed her few belongings into a small canvas bag. A cracked phone, a tattered notebook, and her mother's old ballet slippers, the only thing she refused to let go of. The city never waited for anyone, and it certainly didn't wait for a homeless black girl. Yet, as the crowds rushed by, Amira found rhythm in survival. Her home was a quiet corner near the Grand City Arts Hall, a place she both admired and resented. Every day, limousines and luxury cars lined the street, dropping off the city's wealthiest for concerts, galas, and ballet recitals. Through the glass doors, she could see the chandeliers, the elegant gowns, and the dancers who lived the life her mother once dreamed of. Amira never belonged inside, but she could still claim the sidewalk, her stage, her rebellion, her only link to the mother who taught her to move like the world was still kind. 3 years earlier, before life unraveled, Amira had auditioned for the Eleanor Pierce Ballet Conservatory, the most prestigious academy in the region. She'd made it through every round until the final selection, where the director, Helena Davenport, dismissed her with a polite smile and a cold rejection letter. What Amira never knew then was that Helena had recognized her last name, Collins, the same as Naomi Collins, a former student expelled 18 years earlier for becoming pregnant. Helena called it a matter of discipline and image. Naomi called it the day her dreams died. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share a word of love in the comments. Now, Amira danced not for applause, but for survival. Her movements on the cracked pavement outside the arts hall were fluid and defiant, a mix of grace and grief. People dropped coins when they felt generous, though most just passed by, eyes fixed on their phones. Still, Amira never stopped. Every twirl, every step was a small act of faith that maybe someone would finally see her. One winter afternoon, the sun dipped low behind the marble facade of the hall, turning the windows into mirrors. Amira's reflection looked fragile yet fierce, the reflection of a girl who refused to disappear. Inside, Helena Davenport was preparing for a board meeting. She hated the sight of Amira dancing outside, calling it an eyesore. That day, her patience snapped. She ordered security to clear the area, claiming the girl was disrupting the atmosphere. When the guards approached, Amira didn't run. She simply stopped dancing, picked up her hat, and said, "I'm on public ground." But her calmness only angered them more. One guard kicked over her hat, scattering the coins she'd earned. The sound of metal hitting pavement echoed through the air, sharp and humiliating. For a moment, Amira just stood there. The world had told her 1,000 times to move on, to accept her place. But something in her refused. She looked up at the grand building, the place her mother once dreamed of, and whispered to herself, "You'll remember me." That was the moment everything began to shift. A sleek black car rolled to a stop a few feet away. Inside sat Richard Bennett, a real estate tycoon known for rebuilding half the city's skyline, and his 12-year-old son, Eli. Eli rarely spoke these days. Diagnosed with cerebral palsy, he'd spent most of his life in a wheelchair, withdrawn and tired of being stared at. But when he saw Amira dancing, defying the cold, the humiliation, and the cruelty, something in him stirred. He pressed his hand against the window and whispered, "Dad, stop the car." Richard looked confused, but obeyed. From inside, they watched her. A thin girl in worn sneakers and a patched jacket, moving with a kind of effortless beauty no stage could contain. For the first time in months, Eli's face lit up. Richard had seen countless performers, but none who carried that mix of pain and pride. Amira noticed the car, but kept dancing, her movements now slower and deliberate. She didn't know who they were, but she could feel their eyes on her. Not pitying, but curious, human. When she finished, Eli was smiling. For Amira, that was enough. She gave a small nod, picked up her hat and turned to leave. Inside the car, Richard felt something stir, a guilt he couldn't name. He had built empires but had never stopped to notice the stories happening right outside his glass towers. For reasons he couldn't explain, he told his driver to find out who that girl was. Meanwhile, Helena Davenport stood by the glass doors, watching the same scene unfold. To her, it was an embarrassment. A homeless girl dancing in front of her hall? A girl who carried the same name as the student who had once shamed her institution? Helena decided she would make sure that girl never returned. That night, as Amira counted her few coins under a flickering streetlight, she didn't know the powerful woman inside was already plotting to erase her presence. And she didn't know that the man in the car, the one who had stopped to watch her, would soon become the key to rewriting her mother's history. All she knew was that she had to keep dancing, because sometimes movement is the only thing that keeps a broken heart alive. And somewhere in the city's tallest apartment, a boy who couldn't walk replayed her every step in his mind, not realizing that her dance was about to change both their lives forever. For 3 days, Amira didn't see the black car again. The city moved as it always did, cold, hurried, uninterested. She danced for the rhythm of passing footsteps, but her mind kept returning to that moment when the boy in the wheelchair smiled. It had been so pure, so unguarded, that it lingered like sunlight in a gray week. She didn't know his name, but she could still picture his face pressed against the glass. Then, on the 4th evening, she heard the familiar hum of an expensive engine. When the car stopped at the curb, Amira froze. The window lowered, and there he was, Eli, waving shyly, his father beside him. Richard stepped out, offering a hesitant smile. "We've been looking for you," he said. Amira didn't move, unsure whether to trust him. But Eli's excitement broke the tension. He clapped and said softly, "Dance again." That night became the first of many. Richard invited her to dinner, an awkward beginning that soon turned into something more meaningful. Amira showed Eli how to move to music using only his arms, how rhythm wasn't just in the legs but in the soul. For the first time in years, the boy laughed freely, his father watching in disbelief. Doctors had said Eli would never regain strength, yet after weeks of dancing beside Amira, he started lifting himself more easily, standing for seconds at a time with support. His progress defied logic, and for Richard, that small miracle began to reshape his view of the world. But not everyone was inspired. Word spread quickly through the upper circles of Grand City Arts Hall that a street performer had caught the attention of one of the city's most powerful men. Helena Davenport, the director, was furious. She saw Amira's growing influence as a stain on her institution's reputation. To Helena, image was everything, and people like Amira, poor, black, unrefined, didn't belong anywhere near her world of donors and board members. Within a week, Helena ordered new security cameras to be installed around the building. She personally approved facial recognition software, ensuring Amira would be flagged the moment she appeared. "We can't allow vagrants to linger near the hall," she told her staff. "It sends the wrong message." Behind closed doors, she used harsher words, words that revealed what she really thought. But Amira wasn't just dancing anymore. She was watching, listening, documenting. She had spent the last 2 years quietly collecting pieces of evidence. Photos of falsified scholarships, copies of admission letters that never reached Black or Latino applicants, and voice recordings of Helena's private conversations with donors. What had started as grief for her mother's expulsion had evolved into a mission. She wasn't just dancing for coins now. She was preparing to expose an entire system built to keep people like her out. Richard didn't know the full extent of what she was doing until one night, when she handed him a folder. Inside were printed emails, receipts, and letters all bearing Helena's signature. One document in particular stood out: a transfer of $600,000 from the hall's diversity fund into a private account. The evidence was overwhelming. "You've been gathering this all on your own?" he asked, stunned. Amira nodded. Someone had to. The more Richard read, the angrier he became. He donated to that same fund for years, believing it helped disadvantaged youth. Now he realized it was nothing but a facade. He promised Amira he would handle it the right way, through truth, not revenge. But Amira's definition of right was different. For her, justice had to be seen, not whispered. Meanwhile, Helena prepared for her biggest event of the year, a high-profile charity gala that would attract politicians, investors, and media outlets. It was her chance to reinforce her image as a beacon of culture and generosity. She even invited Richard Bennett to be honored as the night's top donor. What she didn't know was that he had other plans for that stage. In the weeks leading up to the gala, tension built quietly. Amira continued her dance sessions with Eli, now stronger than ever. The boy no longer saw her as just a performer. She was his teacher, his friend, his bridge to something bigger than pity. During one practice, he looked at her and said, "You dance like you're fighting something." Amira smiled. "I am." But Helena's pressure mounted too. Security guards began harassing Amira whenever she passed the area, pushing her away even when she wasn't dancing. One afternoon, a guard grabbed her arm, leaving bruises. She didn't fight back. She simply looked him in the eye and said, "You'll see me again." Later that night, a message from one of her contacts appeared on her cracked phone. "Everything's ready for the gala." Amira stared at the screen, her pulse quickening. Years of silence, humiliation, and loss had led to this. But she wasn't just after revenge. She wanted the world to see what her mother endured, what every rejected dancer like her had been forced to endure. The night before the event, Richard called her. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" he asked. Amira's answer was steady. "It's not about me anymore." Outside, rain swept across the city, washing the streets she'd danced on for years. The Grand City Arts Hall glowed in the distance like a temple of light. Inside, Helena rehearsed her speech, smiling into a mirror, unaware that the empire she built on exclusion was about to collapse. As the camera lights and microphones prepared to capture the gala, Amira slipped on her mother's old ballet slippers, patched, faded, but still holding the weight of every dream denied. And as she looked toward the grand hall where her story began, one thought echoed in her mind. They wanted to erase her, but tomorrow the whole world would remember her name. The night of the Grand City Arts Gala arrived bathed in gold and vanity. Cameras flashed against the marble walls as limousines lined the curb. Inside, the elite of the city gathered beneath crystal chandeliers, sipping champagne and congratulating themselves on the generosity they rarely practiced. Helena Davenport stood at the center of it all, poised and radiant, her smile perfectly rehearsed. Tonight was her night, the culmination of years of control, reputation, and power. Outside, just beyond the velvet ropes, Amira Collins stood in the cold, her heart steady, her eyes fixed on the doors that once shut her out. She wore a simple black dress, borrowed, repaired, but elegant, and her mother's ballet slippers. Each step she took toward the entrance felt like walking through the memories of every rejection, every insult, every coin tossed at her feet. Inside the hall, Richard Bennett was already seated at the front table beside his son, Eli. Eli's crutches rested against his chair, the symbol of a progress that no one but Amira could have inspired. Richard's stomach tightened as Helena took the stage, her voice smooth, confident, practiced. "Tonight," she declared, "we celebrate art, excellence, and the spirit of inclusion." The words dripped with irony. Richard's hand clenched beneath the table. He could have stayed silent. He could have smiled through the lies. But as Helena's image filled the massive LED screen behind her, something inside him snapped. He rose slowly, cutting through the polite applause. The crowd quieted, curious. "Before you continue," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I'd like to share something about inclusion." Helena blinked, uneasy. "Mr. Bennett, perhaps?" But Richard didn't stop. He gestured toward the technicians in the back. Within seconds, the screen flickered, Helena's slideshow vanishing, replaced by scanned letters and documents. The audience murmured in confusion as Richard spoke. 3 weeks ago, my son and I met a young dancer outside this hall. She wasn't welcomed inside. She wasn't considered worthy of this stage. Her name is Amira Collins, the daughter of Naomi Collins, who was expelled from this institution 18 years ago. Gasps rippled through the audience. Helena's face froze. Richard continued, each word sharp as glass. Naomi Collins was expelled not for lack of talent, but because she was pregnant. I have the letter, signed by Helena Davenport herself. On the screen, a scanned image appeared. Pregnant women do not fit our excellence profile. The hall fell silent. Helena's mask cracked. She tried to speak, but the microphone betrayed her with feedback and static. Richard went on, his voice rising with controlled fury. This academy has stolen opportunities from dozens of students based on their race, their class, their stories, all while taking donations meant for diversity programs, $600,000, and transferring them into personal accounts. The next slide showed the transactions. Screenshots of wire transfers. A bank statement with Helena's name. The room erupted, whispers, gasps, disbelief. Helena lunged toward the sound booth, shouting for the feed to be cut, but it was too late. The final piece played, an audio recording of Helena's own voice. We can't turn this into a social project for inadequate people. That single sentence hung in the air like a sentence passed down from history itself. Helena turned to Richard, her voice trembling with rage. You don't know what you're talking about. These are lies. But before she could continue, the ballroom doors opened. The crowd turned. Amira stepped inside, her head high, her movements calm and deliberate. Behind her followed 10 students, young dancers of color, once rejected, now standing proudly at her side. The cameras pivoted toward them, lights flashing. Helena's confidence was shattered. You're trespassing, she hissed. Amira's voice carried through the microphone now in Richard's hand. No, she said, her tone steady. I'm coming home. She walked to the center of the stage, facing the same woman who had destroyed her mother's dreams. The silence was heavy, charged. You spent your life deciding who belonged in art, Amira said. You called people like my mother unfit. You called me a nuisance for dancing outside your doors. But tonight, I'm dancing inside them. The audience rose as soft music began to play Eli's idea. Without a word, Amira moved. Her dance was not rehearsed. It was raw, defiant, beautiful. Every turn was grief made graceful. Every step a reminder that even broken things can move with power. Helena stood frozen, pale and trembling, her world unraveling in front of her. Eli, moved by instinct, stood on his crutches. Slowly, shakily, he made his way toward Amira. The crowd gasped. He reached her side, smiling through tears. Into the microphone. His voice cracked but clear. He said, Amira taught me that dance has no color. She taught me how to walk. You rejected her because she's black. The words cut through the room like thunder. Reporters captured every moment. Phones filmed, flashes popped, and somewhere outside, the world began to watch. Helena tried to leave the stage, but the guards, the same ones who once threw Amira out, stepped in front of her. The weight of justice, long delayed, had finally arrived. As the cameras closed in on her face, Helena's voice broke into desperate fragments. You can't do this. But the crowd was already chanting. Justice for Naomi. Justice for Amira. Amira stopped dancing. She stood in the center, surrounded by applause, her chest rising and falling as tears streaked her face. She didn't smile. She just looked toward the ceiling, where her mother's name once hung on a plaque removed years ago. For the first time, the hall wasn't just a place for the privileged. It belonged to everyone. And as the lights dimmed, Helena Davenport, the woman who built an empire on exclusion, watched her legacy collapse in real time. The same cameras that once ignored a homeless black girl now turned to capture her standing tall on the stage that tried to erase her. The night was no longer Helena's celebration. It was her reckoning. And Amira Collins, barefoot, unbroken, unforgettable, had just rewritten history. In the weeks that followed, the city couldn't stop talking about what happened inside the Grand City Arts Hall. News outlets replayed the footage again and again. Amira Collins standing tall on the stage that once rejected her, Helena Davenport being escorted out by her own guards, and a 12-year-old boy declaring that dance has no color. What was meant to be a night of celebration had become a national reckoning. Helena tried to defend herself, but the evidence was undeniable. Her emails, her recordings, her bank transfers, all of it was laid bare. Within days, she resigned under public pressure. By the end of the month, investigators confirmed what Amira already knew. For nearly 2 decades, Helena had stolen from diversity programs, falsified admissions, and quietly blacklisted minority applicants. The woman once praised as a cultural visionary now faced charges of fraud and racial discrimination. But for Amira, victory didn't feel like vengeance. It felt like breathing after years underwater. When Richard Bennett purchased the hall to rebuild it under a new name, he asked Amira what she wanted to call it. Her answer came without hesitation: the Naomi Collins Institute for Inclusive Arts. The same space that once silenced her mother now carried her name above the entrance. Carved in gold, impossible to ignore. 6 months later, the institute opened its doors to 50 new students from every background. Some were Black, some Latino, some from refugee families who had never imagined stepping into a place like this. Amira, now 17, stood at the front of the studio wearing her mother's slippers, guiding them through the same movements that once got her thrown off a sidewalk. The mirrors that once reflected exclusion now reflected belonging. Eli was there too, no longer in a wheelchair. He still used crutches, but he moved with confidence, his steps in rhythm with the music. To him, Amira was more than a friend. She was proof that kindness could rebuild what cruelty tried to destroy. Together, they led a performance that drew tears from every parent and journalist in the room. And Helena? Her fall was swift and merciless. The elite friends who once praised her name now refused to take her calls. Her penthouse was sold to pay legal fees. When she applied for small administrative jobs, employers recognized her face from the news and turned her away. In one interview, she broke down, admitting, "I thought I was protecting art. I was protecting my power." But it was too late. The world she ruled had already moved on, one rebuilt by the girl she once tried to erase. Amira's story spread far beyond her city. The hashtag Helena Davenport Exposed trended worldwide, but soon another began to rise. Hashtag The Girl Who Danced Back. Documentaries, interviews, and university lectures followed. Harvard, Cambridge, and the Sorbonne invited her to speak about inclusion in the arts. She was no longer the girl outside the door. She was the voice at the microphone, teaching the next generation that talent doesn't ask for permission to exist. In a CNN interview, Amira said something that silenced the studio. "I could have destroyed the people who destroyed my mother. But what's the point of revenge if the system stays the same? Real power is turning pain into purpose." Her words became a quote printed on posters and shared across classrooms. Yet even as she rose to global recognition, she remained grounded in what started it all: a dance on the sidewalk. Every morning, she still passed by the spot where she once performed for coins. The pavement was cracked, the air still cold, but now a small brass plaque sat there, engraved with the words, "Talent knows no color, class, or limitations, only hearts open to recognize it." Sometimes she'd pause there before rehearsal, close her eyes, and remember her mother's voice, soft, tired, but full of love, telling her to keep moving no matter who tried to stop her. That voice had carried her from the street to the stage, from invisibility to history. The Naomi Collins Institute grew to 15 cities within 5 years, offering free training to thousands of underprivileged children. Former street dancers became teachers. Students who had never seen a stage learned to perform under Amira's guidance. The world began to see art not as a privilege, but as a right, one that belonged to everyone. And yet, for all the awards, the applause, and the recognition, Amira's greatest triumph remained invisible to most. The quiet moment she forgave Helena. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't announce it. She chose to let go, because carrying hate, she realized, only chained her to the past. In the end, Helena's name faded from headlines, while Amira's legacy only grew. Her story became a lesson whispered to children, shared in classrooms, quoted in boardrooms. That sometimes, the people the world throws away are the ones who rebuild it stronger than before. So the next time you pass someone who looks invisible, ask yourself, what would the world lose if no one ever stopped to see their light? Because Amira Collins was once just a girl dancing on a sidewalk, and she changed everything. If Amira's story moved you, if it made you think about how far kindness and courage can go, take a moment to share this video. Stories like hers remind us that change often begins with those the world overlooks. What did this story make you feel? Do you think forgiveness is stronger than revenge? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more true stories that open eyes and hearts, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss one.